is Kristen McMahon, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the Robert H. Jackson Center. We are happy to welcome you here this morning for our spring CLE, or program, if you are not looking for credit, entitled The Legacy of the Federal Prosecutor. A couple of housekeeping items before I begin. If you could mute your phones, please, that would be appreciated. Also, if you have not signed in downstairs and you are seeking credit, please remember to do so, as well as fill out your attendance form and your evaluation form. So I think it is fitting to start off with a few of then Attorney General Robert Jackson's thoughts on the role of the federal prosecutor in an address that he delivered 82 years ago today, which is one of the reasons why we are hosting this program on April Fool's Day. It is not a joke, I promise you. So I am paraphrasing a few key selections, but I encourage you, to spend time with it, again, if you have not recently, and we've made this very handy for you. There are keepsake federal prosecutor speeches downstairs on the table, and we will have them around as well. So Attorney General Jackson started with, the prosecutor has more control over life, liberty, and reputation than any other person in America. While the prosecutor at his best is one of the most beneficent forces in our society, when he acts from malice or other base motives, he is one of the worst. There is a most important reason why the prosecutor should have, as nearly as possible, a detached and impartial view of all groups in his community. Law enforcement is not automatic. It is not blind. In times of fear or hysteria, political, racial, religious, social, and economic groups, often from the best of motives, cry for the scalps of individuals or groups because they do not like their views. Particularly, do we need to be dispassionate and courageous in those cases which deal with so-called subversive activities. They are dangerous to civil liberty because the prosecutor has no definite standards to determine what constitutes a subversive activity, such as we have for murder or larceny. Activities which seem benevolent and helpful to wage earners, persons on relief, or those who are disadvantaged in the struggle for existence may be regarded as subversive by those whose property interests might be burdened or affected thereby. Those who are in office are apt to regard as subversive the activities of any of those who would bring about a change of administration. Some of our soundest constitutional doctrines were once punished as subversive. And we must not forget that it was not so long ago that both the term Republican and the term Democrat were epithets with sinister meaning to denote persons of radical tendencies who were subversive of the order of things, then dominant. The qualities of a good prosecutor are as elusive and as impossible to define as those which mark a gentleman. And those who need to be told would not understand it anyway. A sensitiveness to fair play and sportsmanship is perhaps the best protection against the abuse of power. And the citizen's safety lies in the prosecutor who tempers zeal with human kindness, who seeks truth, not victims, who serves the law and not factional purposes, and who approaches his task with humility. And before I introduce our morning speaker, I would like to thank our sponsors for today's event: Chautauqua Abstract Company, Lakeshore Savings, the American Board of Trial Attorneys, the Bar Association of Erie County, Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, the Jamestown Bar Association, Sheriff Jim Quattrone, the Robert H. Jackson Center American Inns of Court, Rogers Land Surveying, and Elegant Edibles, who provided our breakfast and our lunch today. So I am thrilled to introduce someone who embodies the qualities of a good prosecutor, elusive though they may be, per Justice Jackson. Trini Ross was nominated by President Biden on July 26, 2021, and unanimously confirmed by the Senate on September 30th, 2021. President Biden signed Ms. Ross's commission on October 5th, and she became the United States Attorney for the Western District of New York on October 11th, 2021. Ms. Ross is the first Black woman to hold this position in the Western District of New York. She is responsible for overseeing the prosecution of any federal criminal case brought within the 17 counties of Western New York. And the office also represents the United States in all civil matters brought within this territory. Ms. Ross, a native of Buffalo, received her J.D. cum laude from the State University of New York at Buffalo School of Law in 1992, her master's degree from Rutgers University in 1990, and her bachelor's degree from the State University of New York at Fredonia in 1988. Prior to assuming her current role, Ms. Ross most recently served as the Director of Investigations, Legal Division, with the National Science Foundation's Office of Inspector General since 2018. Since 2006, Ms. Ross has also been an adjunct professor at the State University of New York at Buffalo School of Law. And from 1995 to 2018, Ms. Ross was an assistant United States attorney for the Western District of New York, where she served as the senior litigation counsel and the chief of the anti-fraud and corruption section from 2012 to 2017. She has also served as an assistant counsel with the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, and she was previously a civil litigation associate at Hiscox and Barkley. She served as an appellate court attorney for the New York State Supreme Court as well. Ms. Ross, thank you so much for being here with us today. The podium is yours.
Good morning. So I guess this is fitting on this day that Justice Jackson's speech always gets me. What is it about being a prosecutor that is so important to our society? It's everything that's embodied in that speech. The people who are prosecutors hold great power, and as we all know, with great power comes great responsibility. So I'm honored to be the head of the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of New York. That's the message that I and my administration are bringing forth. And what I want to leave you with today is that we understand that. We understand what our power is, and we understand what our responsibility is. But that speech was written so long ago, right? And we're in the 21st century, and things have changed tremendously. And so that's kind of where I want to go today, the prosecutor in the 21st century. So many things are the same, and yet so many things are different. So let me start just a moment about me. I mean, that was a great bio, and when I hear my bio, it just makes me feel old. Not necessarily accomplished, just like it's like a little view into the history of how old I am now. But I spent most of my career as a prosecutor. About 24 years now that I've been back in the office. I started in 1995 as what I call baby AUSA, and I developed into where I am now. So most of my career is a prosecutor. This is what I know. Why is most of my career a prosecutor? Because I love being a prosecutor. I love helping people, and being a prosecutor gives me the opportunity to do that. I love doing justice. You heard my bio. I'm a big person about oversight. So I worked at the IG's office because I believe in oversight and good government and making sure there's no fraud, waste, or abuse with our tax dollars. I worked at the Office of Professional Responsibility because I believe with the power that prosecutor and Department of Justice attorneys have, they need oversight. And the Office of Professional Responsibility is the oversight of attorneys for the Department of Justice who are accused of allegations of misconduct. So I did that job. I'm not the most popular person, and as some of you know in here, I also, for the district, was the point of contact for civil rights cases. So I did color of law cases, and that is, police officers who misuse their power. I'm a big believer in oversight, justice, and serving our community. So let's talk a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about investigations, because I'm talking about investigations in the 21st century. Investigation comes to prosecutors in primarily 3 ways. The first way is a law enforcement officer is investigating a case, they put the case together, they bring it to the prosecutor's office, and they say, hey, here's a case, now I need you to take it the rest of the way. It's kind of like Law and Order, right? The first part is the law, the second part is the order, that's where the prosecutors come in. So that's one way cases come to our office. But there's also reactive cases. And in reactive cases, think of a bank robbery. Something is happening, somebody robs a bank, they get caught by law enforcement, and we have to do something right away. We don't have a chance to take that moment, that beat, that step back to say, okay, let's check this out and make sure we've got all our ducks in a row, everything's right. Nope, in a reactive case, we have to be very careful about not letting someone who may be harmful to the community leave and go back out into the community. So that's a reactive case. Those are tough because then you're always playing catch up as a prosecutor to try to build the case after charges have been filed. And then the third way, prosecutors and law enforcement working investigations together as a team. Those are primarily your longer fraud cases, your longer drug cases, your longer investigations, where the prosecutor and the law enforcement officers can sit down together and work out a plan and make sure they have the evidence before charges are brought. Now, once a case is charged, it could be shored up. Again, the investigation could continue. You could charge someone, and then you continue the investigation. So like in a reactive case that I mentioned, that's usually the way it works. But even in some of the longer investigations, you have enough evidence as a prosecutor, you take it to court, you charge the case, but you can still continue the investigation to make sure you have not left any stone unturned. So let's take a look back. This is what I call the evolution of prosecutions to the 21st century. All right, so let's talk about how it was. So back in the day, as I call it, documents used to be kept in file cabinets, right? We all know that. File cabinets. All kinds of file cabinets. And when we did an investigation, and especially in white-collar cases, which was my primarily what I did in my career as a prosecutor, I would say to agents, go get these documents. This is what we're looking for. The kind judge signed our search warrant, so let's go out and get the documents. And they would come back, and they would just go through file cabinets. And if it was a bank fraud case, I would say, get documents of evidence of bank frauds, which are like checks or bank statements, and they can look through these file cabinets, and they could pull out the documents we needed, and they could leave everything else. And then, or sometimes they would come back with this, with banker boxes. I once had a case with 40 banker boxes lying in the room, and you could barely walk in there, but you took your boxes, you opened them up, you looked through it, and it was great, right? You knew exactly what you needed. You took some, you said, this is a yes, this is what we need for our case, this is a no, put it back in the box. That's the way it used to be. And the prosecutor with the law enforcement officer, we would sit there, we would have fun as we went through documents, we tagged, we put over here. It was great. It was great. I have fond memories. And then life became more complicated with computers and smartphones, and all of a sudden there were less paper documents and more electronic documents on electronic devices like this, floppy disks, hard drives, thumb drives, and now we're at the cloud. I don't even know where that is, but there it is. Where's my stuff? It's on the cloud. Okay. So, how do we get documents from the cloud? So you can no longer just walk into a room and say, these are the documents we need. These are the documents we need for a bank fraud case. Because you would pull one of these things. They would, okay, take all the floppy disks. Oh, my. Now we have to go through all of it because we took it. Take, the hard drive. hard drive holds a lot of information. So this is our life now. I can't sit there any longer with the law enforcement officers. Well, I guess I'm not really working cases anymore, but I wouldn't sit there anymore with the law enforcement officers and say, let's go through these documents as we're chatting about different things. Now this is going to a lab somewhere. I don't even know where the lab is. I don't talk to the lab technician, and Lord knows, I don't even know what they're doing to get this information. But somehow we have to get this information. So now there's several more steps than it used to be. I miss file cabinets. I miss banker boxes. So now this takes this a little bit away from the prosecutor, because now we need to hire specialists. We need to hire forensic specialists, computer specialists. We need to make sure we don't put this in a computer, because I just want to see if the evidence is there, but I can't just take it and put it in a computer because I might mess up something. I might delete it or alter it. So we get this, and we, the prosecutors, don't get the evidence back for a little bit of time. Now, the clock is ticking, right? We have an obligation to move cases along as quickly as possible. But now we've got this gap time, and this gap time has to do with the fact that we can't just look at the page and say, yes or no, this is the evidence we need. It has to go to somebody. They have to pull it. They have to get it back to us. We have to figure out how to go through it. And once we do all that, then we can look at the evidence. So I'm showing you this. I'm not even talking about the smartphones. How much information do you keep on your smartphone, right? So add that to the calculus, and with also the caveat that most people have passwords on their smartphones. So if a law enforcement officer takes a smartphone, we can't just look at it again to see what's there. It has to go to a lab, and then they have to try to crack the passcode. So that adds even more time. So this much time to go through this much time to try to get in the smartphone. Smartphones have videos, they have pictures, they have voice recordings, and I can tell you from cases I work, they are a treasure trove of evidence, but only if you could crack the code. So this is where we are as prosecutors now. We're no longer in control of the evidence that's coming in that we need to make a case. We're waiting for people who have no background in law and no understanding of how long it takes to get this evidence to the court, and we're on a time frame. We're just out of control. So those are changes, and those are sad and bad changes from my perspective as a prosecutor, because I'm no longer able to just know if we have the evidence we need for a case. But wait. It got worse. That was bad. But remember the days when we had paper documents? We could go to court and we date stamp them, and we would say from 1 to, we had some crazy numbering in my office, 1, 1.1, 1.1A, whatever, for each page had to be numbered. And then we would take them to court, and we would present our case on Elmo. Remember Elmo? Okay, some people call it the overhead projector. For some reason, when I started in the office, it was called Elmo, so it's forever Elmo to me. And everyone in the courtroom would see that document, right? We would take it, and I would say, Judge, showing government exhibit number 5, and I would put it on Elmo, and I was in control of it. And it felt great, and I could point to it, and I could circle with my finger, and everybody could see Elmo, and it was wonderful. And then I would remove that document and put the next one. So you can see the problem with this. When I did complex fraud cases, this could have taken all day, me doing that. But the good thing was I would have all the documents in front of me. I knew what they were. I could put them on Elmo, talk about it, take it off, put the next document on. No more. You know that, right? No more. Now we have this, right? We have CPUs, we have computers, we have technology. And so you have to find the document that you're looking for in the technology, however you've stored it on this device. And I don't know about you guys, but technology doesn't love me. And so I can assure you that even though I think I have it all together, I am going to go to court and something's going to go wrong, right? So this is what we're dealing with now. And this it gets even worse, right? First we had those big boxes. Now we have the laptops. And if you were to come to my office now, you will see prosecutors, AUSAs going into meetings with just their laptop, no longer a pad and paper. They just take them and they walk around. We have Wi-Fi, it's great. So everything is part of technology now. And courtrooms are now full of technology because of this. So even the judges, even people who are attorneys practicing in court, this is what you see when you go to court now. Everything's wired because we are in the 21st century. And as technology progressed, so did the way prosecutors work. So now with the laptops, they walk, like I said, they walk around, they walk into conference rooms. They can't just say, here's this piece of paper, now it's all on their laptops. With the courtroom high tech, you go in, it's added a burden to the prosecutor's office because at least in federal district court, we are responsible for making sure all the evidence is on this tech that's in the courtroom. So our staff, our paralegals, they have to go in, they have to make sure it's set up. Defense counsel use our paralegal to pull up evidence that they want. The court uses our paralegals to ask for evidence that they want. And so that's something that wasn't there before, whereas before with my little paper, I could just walk it over to defense counsel and he or she had it themselves. So let's talk a little bit about the changes with the actual prosecutors, the actual people who are doing this work. Now, as we know, the original prosecutors and lawyers were white and male. That's the way it was for many, many years until women were allowed to go to law school and apply to be practicing attorneys in the bar. But in the 21st century, it's very different. Now we have a diversity of people in the law, thank goodness, and as prosecutors as well. And why is that important? It's important because we have a diversity in society, and not everybody has the same life experiences. So it's really important that we have people who represent the society that we live in working in this very important role as prosecutors. So the first diverse Attorney General for the United States of America was Attorney General Eric Holder, and that was great. And then after him, it was a woman, a black woman, Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and that's awesome. And now, after her, is Attorney General Merrick Garland, a Jewish man who is the grandson of immigrants. The role of the prosecutor has clearly changed. It's changed in what we do, it's changed in how we do it, and it's changed in who we are in those roles. So what is true now and what has always been true as a prosecutor, as people who are prosecutors, our duty is to do justice, and that remains the same as it always has. Our commitment to the job must be the same that it always has been, and that is to care for the victims of crimes and the defendants as well, and to make sure we've done our due diligence to not make a mistake, because people's lives are at stake. And our duty to society must be the same that it's always been. As Justice Jackson said in his speech, we have a lot of power, and that power should always be used for the good of the society that we're in. As I stated, what has changed? Technology has changed, still lack of diversity. We need to work on that, and I think we are. And the laws have changed, they have expanded. If you look at the different codes and all the laws that are out there, it's incredible. I would never know them all, but I do want to share this with you, and you may not know. There's a law about not using Smokey the Bear's image without permission. There really is. And I think Woody Woodpecker too, but I would have to go back and look at that one. So when I was a new prosecutor, one of the pranks hazing, some might say, that they pulled is they would call and pretend they were a law enforcement officer, and then they would say, we're calling with this major crime. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm ready. This is what I've been waiting for. And they're like, somebody's using Smokey the Bear's image without permission. I'm like, what? This isn't true. And yes, it's Title 18, United States Code, whatever, and we would look in. Yes, there is a law for that. So I want to say thank you for listening, and I guess there's going to be a chat with me, but if there's any questions, I'm very, very happy to take them. Oh, yes, hi.
Hi. You mentioned needing to crack cell phones. What's the law on the prosecutor's access to cell phone records and Fifth Amendment rights? Does an order from the judge get you access to the phone itself, and then the suspect has a Fifth Amendment right to not give you the password? How does that work?
I don't know, we have a judge here. Judge, you want to answer that? No. You know, we get the device, right? So go back to my file cabinet analogy. The documents we're looking for that we have a lawful order to take are inside that container. So if you think about it the same way, that's how I think about it with electronic devices. We would put in a search warrant application. We want to take cell phones or floppy disks or thumb drives. And then we would put in there also what we're looking for on those devices.
But the warrant doesn't get you into the device, it just gets you access to the device?
Well, the problem with cell phones is not about that. It's about passcodes.
Yeah, right.
So, right. So that's the issue we have with those. But no, when we write a search warrant affidavit, we would put in there what we want from that device. So if I wanted bank records, I would put in my search warrant affidavit, we're looking for bank records. And then the judge would sign off saying it's okay to take those bank records. Just so happens they're on an electronic device. So we would say we want cell phones, we want floppy disks, we want bank records. We would put all that in there. So we would have the opportunity to get that, but first we got to get into the phone. Is that right, Judge? You don't have to answer that. He'll talk to you later if I say anything that's incorrect. Yes? Well, the sentencing guidelines are no longer mandatory, so the judge actually does have discretion now. And the sentencing guidelines are advisory, so they're still there, and we look at them to see what the range is, but the judge is not any longer obligated to sentence within that guideline range. So if that's what you're talking about, that's changed. But I will say there are still some sentences that are mandatory. Like, for example, Title 18, 1028A, aggravated identity theft is a mandatory 24-month sentence. And there's a lot of sentences within Title 21, which are the narcotics and drug laws, that are mandatory. So we do take all that into consideration if someone wants a pretrial disposition, right? So after trial, it's just after trial, and the judge takes it from there. But before trial, you're right, the prosecutors can charge bargain. The prosecutors can use different equipment that we have, like cooperation provisions to get people out of those mandatory sentences. But for the most part, it's not like it was before. One thing that you said at the beginning of your question that I do disagree with is that we have more power now. I don't think so. I think it was more power back when Justice Jackson was AG. There wasn't as much oversight, and I talked to you a bit about oversight. There wasn't as much public scrutiny too, which I think is important. Defense attorneys keep us on our toes and keep us on a straight and narrow, but there's a lot of different oversights and federal prosecutors, and I think all prosecutors now, that actually limits and not enhances the way it was back in Justice Jackson's day. Yeah.
After watching last week's confirmation hearings for Judge Jackson Brown, I should say that sometimes cringeworthy confirmation hearings. Tell us about what the confirmation process was like for you. You got a unanimous vote from the Senate, which of course reminds me that so did Judge Jackson Brown when she got elevated to the district court. But is there any comparison to what? No. Okay.
Not at all. First off, I did not have to sit in front of, I did go through the Senate Judiciary Committee, but everything was on the papers. They would send us questions, and we would answer them, and we would send them back. And it was a back and forth that way, but I was not on the hot seat like she was. And it's probably a good thing.
Yes. So you went from a rank-and-file attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office to now the boss of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Buffalo. And the question I ask is, when you do, I know you're mostly managing now, but when you still dabble in legal work, are you sick and tired of the 1983 actions and the internal investigations, and now you're dabbling in RICO and having a chance to do this case or do that case? And I say that as the young attorneys here, you get your cases assigned to you, and now you're in the position where you're the one doing the assigning of cases or getting to choose what you do, and how that experience is like for you.
Yeah, so it's a little different. I mean, your question is on point. When I was still in the office as senior litigation counsel or the chief of the anti-fraud and corruption, I was deputy chief of white collar, and then I got to assign cases out to the line attorneys who I supervise. And so, you try to enhance people's strengths by giving them cases they're going to shine, they're going to excel at. And thank goodness there's prosecutors there who can handle everything. For example, child pornography cases. We don't want to talk about them. They're horrific and they're horrible. And there's some people who just can't do them because of that subject matter. But there are some people who have absolutely no problem with doing them. So there's some people who have the acumen to do complex white-collar cases. And there are some people who are better off doing more gun and drugs and gang-type cases because it's a little bit more physical. Like you have something tangible you could just grab. Like, okay, they got all the drugs. There they are. So I don't assign cases now in my role, but when I did assign cases, and I rose up the ranks. So it's kind of like the same, what you're asking a question, like how was it being the line attorney and then becoming the person who assigned cases or took care of those type of things. But right now, my job is, like I'm here, I talk a lot. I put together, I think, a crackerjack management team, so there's always people back who I could trust. My first assistant is here, Scott Sroka, so he's in charge of pretty much everything as well, and I'm his boss, and then he's the boss of everybody, kind of too. So I want to say I don't dabble in cases anymore, but that would not be true. I can't help myself, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of the people that I supervise. I love being a prosecutor. I love the thought process of putting the puzzle together and figuring it out. Either this is the person or this isn't. Those are the answers, right? This is the person who committed the crime that we're alleging has been committed or not. And then we go from there. So, I dabble a little bit. I think they want me to stop dabbling, though. Yes, ma'am.
With the appointment of every attorney general, there seems to be priority that the attorney general places on certain types of cases.
Yes.
What have been the priorities
From Attorney General Garland. It's easy: violence in the community, gun violence. It's all over the country. We are having a hard time, like, figuring out how to respond to stop it, which is really important because innocent people are being killed, right? Children and, you know, people who have nothing to do with any kind of criminal activity. So the number one priority, and it's always terrorism, I should say that. So I don't even say terrorism anymore. National security and domestic terrorism now are paramount. You know what's going on in DC with the January 6th investigations and everything. So that's always number one. But it changes, right? So number two is going to be the gun violence. We have ghost guns, we have guns that are already in the community, we have guns that are coming into the community, we have people using the guns, we have very young people using the guns. It's a priority for the department to try to stop the gun violence. And then they have a lot of other priorities too. Every day I look, it's like, oh, this is a priority, this is a priority. But that's, I would say, outside of terrorism, that's the number one priority. Yes. How are you? You too?
Jamestown has a gun problem.
Yep. I'm aware, I just want you to know that.
And the million-dollar question is, what can your agency do to help us take back our streets in Jamestown?
Yeah, well, you know what, that's a question for the community, right? Like, first I need to understand what the problem is in each and every community. Jamestown has a gun problem, Niagara Falls has a gun problem, Buffalo has a gun problem, Rochester has a tremendous gun problem. And each of those communities are so different. Whatever we come up with, whatever plan we come up with or develop for one community may not work in the other because of the differences in community. So we're reaching out, we're talking to law enforcement in those different communities in an effort to understand why that gun problem is in that community. So for example, like in Rochester and Buffalo, it's gangs, and we're talking, you know, Crips and Bloods and everything have moved into our neck of the woods. That may or may not be the same here in Jamestown. But we need to know that, and then we could put together the plan to address that once we have that information. So that's what we're doing. We're gathering information, we're putting together a plan. You know, people talk about, like, I know in Buffalo they talk about the 90 corridor from Ohio and guns coming in that way, and that's a problem. But now we're talking about ghost guns, which are just delivered to someone's doorstep, and that's not illegal. But we're also talking about guns that are already in the community. Right? We have to get the guns that are there out of the communities, because even if we stop the guns coming into the community and we stop the ghost guns from being delivered, we're still behind. The guns are already there. So it's a multi-pronged approach that we have to take to address that issue.
Somebody from your department to help us?
You know how to find me. You know how to find me, yes, of course. Absolutely, and that's what we're doing. And I gotta tell you, I'm delayed, right? So I came in, and the first thing I wanted to do was go out into the communities, and COVID said, nope, you're not doing that, so I haven't. So I've been in office since October, and COVID just kind of got lifted. So I'm a little bit behind where I would want to be at this point in my tenure if it hadn't been for a pandemic. So just know that. So
We appreciate it.
I know, thank you. Good to see you too. All right, so are we ready? More questions?
Question is, Trini, if you want to sit right there, I'll sit right here. Just,
I do want to say thank you for your questions. This is my favorite part of talking.
well, it's my favorite part of listening. My job was to simply learn a little bit more about you. You know, you had your investiture at Hutch Tech. You're a Western New York person. You know, at what point was there an aha moment that I'm going to be a lawyer and be was there a start the trajectory?
It was a mistake. It was a mistake. I was going to be an engineer. That's why I went to Hutch Tech. I have my high school diplomas in electrical technology. I started at Fredonia, and I don't know if they still have it. It was called the 3-2 program, and you spend 3 years at like a state college, and then you would go to a university and finish your engineering degree. And that's what I was going to do. My son's a computer engineer. My husband has his degree in industrial technology. My brother's a computer engineer. I'm sorry, my son's a computer scientist. My brother's a computer engineer. There is a difference, I've been told. And my sister-in-law is an electrical engineer, and everybody's engineers, and then there's me. I'm the only lawyer. So it was a mistake. But when I went to Fredonia, after doing 4 years of engineering and, doing engineering classes there, you had to take those gen ed classes, those to make you a whole person, they told me. And so I did. I took sociology and I took psychology, and I was like, oh, this is super interesting. And then I took more, and then I took more, and I took less science and math and more sociology and psychology, and then I wanted to graduate in 4 years, so I thought, okay, now I need to switch my major, and I did, and then I decided I wanted to be a professor. So I wanted to be a professor, so I was studying sociology, focusing on criminal justice, and I went to Rutgers to get a master's, well, it was supposed to be a PhD, in criminology and criminal justice. But after a semester, I realized I'm more of a hands-on person and not a theoretical-only person, so this wasn't going to work for me. Did I want to spend the rest of my life theorizing about things, or did I want to spend the rest of my life doing things? And I decided I wanted to do. So it was a little bit of a crisis moment for me, because now I gave up engineering, which is, kind of hands-on, and now I don't want to do what I thought I wanted to do. And my best friend from high school called, and I was talking with him, and he told me he was going to law school. And I was like, oh, is there a law school in Buffalo? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, then I'm going to law school too. So that's how it happened. And I went to law school, and then I was going to be a criminal defense attorney doing civil rights cases. And I became a prosecutor for however long it's been, 24 years. So nothing ever goes as planned.
So here you are, and SUNY Fredonia, front cover, this is it, right here. Front and center, nice picture. And what did that mean to you? Because there are many Fredonia graduates here, as you were proceeding along in your career path.
What did what mean to me?
SUNY Fredonia. I mean, the 4 years at SUNY.
It was interesting. It was an interesting 4 years at Fredonia. I grew up in the city of Buffalo, and so that was a sea change in life, being in a rural area. A lot of the students, when I was at Fredonia, came from outside of New York City, some of the suburbs, and some of them never had a black person in their whole high school class with them. So that was interesting and a sea change and a new perspective. A lot of the students of color came from New York City, and a lot of them were first-generation Americans, and they came a lot from the different islands like Trinidad and Tobago, and so that was a different culture. So I learned a lot. I mean, it was just a multitude of things I had not experienced in my life before I went to Fredonia. For example, did you guys know that they call people from Trinidad Trinis? How do I know this? Because everybody kept coming up to me saying, "Are you from Trinidad?" And I was like, "No, I'm from Buffalo." And then finally, I asked someone, I said, "Why do people keep asking me if I'm from Trinidad?" He said, "Oh, because we call people from Trinidad Trinis." I don't think my parents knew that. But, so these are things I learned at Fredonia, right? I like that it was a small college, so you could really get to know your professors if you wanted to. You could really get to know the other students. It was, kind of a tight community like that, and insulary. In some ways, that's good and that's bad. So,
What was it like day one? You went the investiture, you were sworn in. Now you have a different office. You know the facility, you've been there all the time. You had your own office, your own location. All of a sudden, you take the top office. You walk in day one. What was that like?
first I thought the office was too big. I mean, I was used to being in an assistant's office, which I think are good size in our office, but I just remember looking and saying, who needs this much room? And then it hit me that when I came back to the office, I felt great. Like, I love being a prosecutor. I love being an AUSA. I know what I'm doing. And I went in that office and I said, but this is not that job. So now I'm back not knowing what I'm doing. And they don't give you a PD, a position description. They don't give you a handbook. They say, here's the job, and I'm like, what's the job? And here it is, this is the job. So being part of the office for 23 and a half years before I left was great because at least I knew something, right? And I could walk around, I could talk to the prosecutors about their cases and what's going on and what is working and what we may need to tweak and what we need to change completely. But the job is like much more than just the law now, and so I'm just learning that.
We're here today on the 82nd anniversary of Robert Jackson's speech to the federal prosecutors. Is that part of your learning process of sort of reading that and its usage?
Yeah, I've read that before, like well before. I think it's an important speech, and it lasts today. Like you say, 80-something years later, that speech is still very relevant to prosecutors all the time. When I was supervising, sometimes prosecutors would do things that I wanted them to think about, and I would print out portions of the speech and leave it on their chair, and I would write a note and would say, please read this, and when you're done, come talk to me. And every single time they knew exactly why I did that. I thought it was a nice way of educating them, giving them some history, talking to them about some things. It's an important speech. It remains an important speech. So I read it, I use it, I continue to use it. So it's good that we're here today celebrating that.
Well, we're delighted you are here, and you're also here with your first deputy, Scott Soroka, who has written a play that we're going to be part of shortly thereafter. What do you know about Scott Soroka you can share?
I don't know, Scott. What do you want me to share? Scott's a Western New York native. He is well known in this area because he's quite a community servant, not just as a public servant where he gets paid, but he has done things in a community like this that are very important outside of the law. His father is renowned. Everybody knows Scott's dad. We all love Mr. Soroka. And, Scott went to D.C. We lost a great Western New Yorker. And Scott tells the story better than I, but I think it was, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago?
That's what you're talking about.
When we were at Spot Coffee and I said, we're going to get you back to Buffalo. 10 years ago, so Scott came to town, and even though when he moved out of town, he kept his Western New York connections very close. And so he would come back and he would, as I would like to say, hold court at Spot Coffee on Delaware and Chippewa. And Scott would really have a schedule, and he arranged people to come in all day to have coffee with him. It was great. So the one day I was lucky because I didn't have to leave, and I could watch all these people coming in and having coffee with Scott, and everybody's always happy to see him. And one of his other friends, who's a Western New Yorker who no longer lives in the area, was there, and we were talking. And Scott said, and I vaguely remember saying, we're going to get Scott back to Western New York. So I was very fortunate that prophecy came true. So
Well,
Scott's
thank
back.
you. And not only is his father a very famous guy, but his grandfather is the connect to much of what we're doing today.
Yes.
Has he shared all that Elliot and Ness Untouchable story?
Yes. Yes.
That'll all become clear, ladies and gentlemen. It'll become clear. As you look towards the next 5 years in Trini Ross's career, what do you see? Can you forecast a little bit about what you'd like to accomplish in your office?
Well, I have a commission for 4 years, so it won't be 5, unless the president wins re-election and reappoints me. But my commission is for 4 years. So in that time, one of the things, and Scott will laugh at this, that I keep saying is I need to get our office into the 21st century. I mean, so far as technology and people using the technology and the way we're doing things, we're not quite there, but I'm pushing. For example, we used to print out everything to sign off on it and route it in physical paper and then scan it back into the computer. And I was like, what are we doing here? You could just sign it digitally, So now we're doing that. So little things like that just helps. With the pandemic, as we all know, we could work remotely from anywhere. And so I instituted a work-life policy where people could telework up to 2 days a week. But if you have digital signatures, you don't need to be there to sign something. So what I'm trying to do is integrate a 21st century way of doing things with technology and having work-life balance with the very important job that every person in my office has, not just the prosecutors, because we depend on the paralegals and we depend on the legal assistants. And, so for example, Scott, one of his first tasks when he came on board was to stand up the litigation support unit, which is really important because of technology. And we get so many items that it's easy to lose track of. So Scott did that. Now we have a litigation support unit, which is going to help the assistants and the paralegals track all the evidence that comes in, so we don't lose track of it.
You've broken the glass ceiling here in Buffalo with regards to your position. If you had a chance to take Scott's seat at Spot Coffee and invite anybody for, 2 or 3 people to come and sit down with you, whoever they may be over time, who do you think you would like to come and invite for coffee and ask a question?
So dead or alive?
Dead or alive?
Okay, first and foremost, Harriet Tubman, because she's my hero. I would say what I always say about her, but a judge is here, and I don't want him to hear me use foul language. But I'm going to say it anyway, Judge, with your permission. She was the first badass woman before we even knew there were badass women, right? So, Harriet Tubman, who else? Probably Barack Obama. And you said 3, right? Albert Einstein. He taught, do you know Albert Einstein taught black men physics when nobody else would?
No.
He was amazing. I mean, not just as a scientist, which we all know he was an amazing scientist. He was also an amazing humanitarian. So,
as we draw closure here, and there's people who not only in the audience of interest, and there are students who are watching this online and will be watching this.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, is there a message you would like to give, or perhaps a question I should have asked that I haven't?
No. I don't think so. I will just say that I'm here to serve. It's what I've always done. My uncle was George K. Arthur, and he was a civil rights representative in Buffalo. There's pictures of him with Dr. King. I was fortunate to be fairly close to him and work with him when he was Buffalo Common Council president. So he and my parents instilled in me the understanding of service to the community. The community is only as good as we make it, and if we want to live in good, safe communities, then we need to make sure we're part of making good, safe communities, and everybody has a role in that. No matter, you don't have to be in public service as your career, but you do have to be in public service as your life, as you're going through life. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming here on the 82nd anniversary
82nd.
of the federal prosecutor. Trini Ross. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get you to sign this?